Hey friends, welcome back to Thrive and Align Healing Podcast. This is episode 42, and this week we're going to talk about COVID and how it impacts our mental health. I'm pretty passionate about this right now because I just got over COVID and experienced, I think that was the worst part for me, honestly, is how it impacted my mental health. And I just didn't feel like anybody was talking about this. This is not a symptom that I had heard about over this past year, right? And then as I was talking about it with other people, they're like, oh yeah, I have experienced that too. And I'm like, why are we not talking about this? Like, why is the society as a whole not aware that like this can everybody experience COVID differently, but it can for some individuals like impact their mental health. So that's why we're talking about this today, because I'm passionate about it.
Yes, and you're right. A lot of people aren't really talking about it. I think part of it is also because we have a little bit of a stigma in the US around the idea of mental health, right? Like people aren't always openly talking about their feelings and their emotions and even depression. So I think that might be part of it as well. But when COVID-19 or the coronavirus attacks our body, right? When we get exposed and we get infected, it looks for these cells called ACE receptors, ACE receptors, and those are found all throughout our body, especially in our brain, in our gut. There's the highest concentration for most folks in our lungs, and that's why a lot of the COVID symptoms were around coughing and lungs, especially at the beginning. Now, they've been, over the last year, have identified several different strains of COVID, right? So that has also kind of mutated, but it still uses those ACE receptors to enter in our body. So it sort of has these specialized spike proteins that are looking for those ACE cells, and then it is able to enter those cells and then begin replication, right? And then that's where it begins to kind of take off. And so because those cells, they're found in our gut, that's why we get the gastrointestinal symptoms, right? They're found in our brain, so that's why we get changes in our taste and smell, changes in our neurotransmitters, and so that's how it directly affects our mental health. And so when we experience COVID, depending on where your concentrations of those ACE receptors are, those cells, that often dictates what symptoms people are going to experience the most, if you will.
I love that we're talking about this because I don't know, maybe I have not been like immersed in like staying with the media and everything like with COVID, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe I was just unaware. But
Yeah.
I feel like the actual like science part of it and like how this works like isn't being discussed. Like people are just like afraid like, oh, I can get pneumonia and then I'm going to be in a hospital and be on oxygen and like I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Right? And it's like no, like you have to understand the reason COVID, like, so my family, we got it at Christmas. We were all together, and one of the family members had a sinus infection and just infected 7 out of 10 of us, right? So, and we all experienced COVID differently. And people, that creates fear for them. Like, why do you have it this way and I have it this way? Like, has it mutated? Is it different? You know, but understanding like, no, it's just you have ACE receptors throughout your whole body. And like the virus just infiltrated a different set of ACE receptors in you than it did me. Right.
And our genetics is a little bit different, right?
Mm-hmm.
So some people may have those, I mean, like I said, they're all over our body, but some people may have higher concentrations in some areas than others, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's being linked to how we experience the symptoms, because that's one thing that's different about this virus versus things like the cold or the flu, right? Influenza A or B, is that those are a little bit more predictable because of how they enter our body. They are not as specific as to what cells they need to attach to begin replicating versus the coronavirus. That's why they were a little bit worried about the severity of the virus at the beginning, because they're like, oh, the mechanism is different. It is very specified and specific. And so
I also wonder, I mean, they won't know for a while, like if you take a segment of the population that's like fit and healthy that gets corona versus a non-fit and healthy, like are there different sets of ACE receptors that are more susceptible at that point based on your fitness and health level?
Oh, possibly. I will tell you that what they're seeing, I can't say all, not all athletes, but I am seeing what they're calling a post-COVID viral syndrome. And I think people who are fitter and healthier are bringing this to the doctor's attention because this is where they recognize it the most. So post-COVID, right? They've cleared the infection, they've tested negative, they're doing well, they're trying to get back into their exercise routine, and they find themselves, they find like their heart rate is much higher than it has been in the past.
Yes, confirm that.
Yeah. And sometimes that recovery is taking a lot longer than normal, or they're not able to work out as hard because their heart rate is jumping up too high too quickly.
Is that because, okay, the question is, and we're calling on a tangent, podcast family, sorry.
We'll have to bring it back around.
Is it truly that it's because it's impacting athletes specifically, or it's only becoming aware of because that's impacting an athlete's world and everybody is experiencing this, but they're not necessarily working out, so they don't realize?
It's because the awareness,
Okay.
Right? Because the average person isn't always watching their heart rate. They aren't always, paying attention to those types of things. And so, I mean, it kind of becomes their new norm, but they don't notice it unless they're under stress or like they're exerting themselves.
They're not obsessive like us athletes. Like somebody was like, why do you wear a Fitbit? I was like, because I'm constantly watching my heart rate.
Yeah. It's becoming, that's just that, because of that information, right, and that awareness, it's becoming or the understanding is being revealed to us a little bit more. Because at the beginning people are like, okay, once you're over it, right? There aren't any long lasting effects except for like the lung scarring. They pointed that out and figured that out pretty early on, and that one was kind of obvious, right? Especially if people were experiencing or were getting in a situation where they needed assistance with oxygen or a CPAP or a BPAP or, a ventilator or something like that. But now that it's a little bit more widespread and there's different, variants and even the severity isn't as bad, that's, what we're seeing is they're bringing it more and more attention to the doctors and saying, hey, I wasn't like this before. This is the only thing that's changed. And now I can't get back into my regular routine because my heart rate skyrockets. And so they're suspecting that some of that is, those ACE receptors are also congregated in the heart as well. But so it would be equivalent. It's not exactly, but it'd be equivalent to kind of like this idea of scarring, right? Like the tissue has changed. And so it is going to take a little while to recover, and addressing that. The conventional medicine doesn't have a lot of options to address that right now because they're still learning about it. But that can be sort of the post-viral, can be part of that post-viral syndrome in some folks.
Is that permanent? Or is it just like, it's just a lingering, it's going to take a while, eventually, hopefully you'll go back to being normal?
Yeah. So right now it's lingering, and it really, that part is often depending on your level of wellness. And your level of health.
So that message, what you just said there, how as our athlete brains translate that is like, oh, okay, I'll just start working out twice a day then. We'll just force this body to like recover.
Okay. So that may not be the best idea when we're talking about there does have to be a little bit of a recovery period and convalesce so that, because our heart's a muscle, right? Our heart is always working. Whether we recognize it or not, it has to, or we wouldn't be alive. And so the trick is to be able to rest while it's working. Is a challenge for the heart, but it's possible by keeping our heart rate down. That means your heart's not working as hard.
Right.
So the in-betweens, you can have a little bit of recovery and some regeneration of those heart cells when we have a lower heart rate.
Yeah. So. Okay. All right. Off this tangent. That's like a whole nother podcast. It would be super interesting to do. So these ACE receptors, for me personally, like the virus attacked my brain, and are they in your spinal cord?
Well, within the nervous system, yeah. So they're also within that spinal column. Yes. Yeah.
So for me and my husband, how it showed up is it attacked our brain and our spinal column because we had so much pain. Like it hurt in our back and our head, like a migraine.
I was going to say headaches and migraines. That's part of the reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
And so in that, like, I think you made me aware, like, okay. And I kind of put the clues together, like, okay, so the virus is attacking the ACE receptors in my brain, but I didn't follow that thought and think like, well, that means that it's going to be impacting my mental health. I just was like every day, and I know what depression is because I've been depressed, and I know like chemical depression versus like this moment in time I'm sad, right? Like I was like, I don't understand. Like this feels like chemical depression. Like I cannot. My brain feels foggy and I can't like think clearly. And it's like, I'm just like, I'm getting more and more hopeless every day. And then like having to deal with panic attacks, like just laying in bed and like feeling that tightness of chest and the short, like your heart rate spiking, your blood pressure going up, and like you're about to have a panic attack. Like I'm having to deal with that every day. And it's like, it's hard enough to be sick, but then to like start going down this like dark trail of like, I'm never going to get better. I'm never going to get my smell and taste back. Like I'm going to suffer for the rest of my life. Right. Like that makes it even harder.
Right. Right. Because you have this, fog or this cloud of depression that comes with some of the symptoms. And, it's hard to kind of see through that.
Yeah.
And so so at the beginning, of the virus, they were identifying depression and anxiety because of isolation, right? And because now that you've been tested positive, you're in this like quarantine and you're, you have this other level of fear. You don't want to infect other people, right? Like, how am I going to come through this virus? So you have that component of it and those feelings around that. But you're exactly right. Within the actual brain, we do have ACE receptors that are part of how our brain produces those neurotransmitters, right? So if those cells are being affected, so that they're not producing our dopamine and our serotonin in adequate amounts, or if they're producing too much of something like our GABA, which is an inhibitory neurotransmitter, it changes how we see things, right? It changes how we feel. So it's a little bit more than just, those thoughts of isolation and those thoughts of, and that fear. This is something that's physically actually changing. Now, I will share.
Like, I want to like, that is beautifully said, like, because that totally expressed how I felt. We've been in isolation for a year, right? Like, and I haven't been depressed. This was very different than feeling isolated.
Yes. Yeah. So the within the field of neurology, and so not all practitioners know this because they're not talking about sort of the depression and the anxiety and the mental changes that come with the COVID infection. But I work with an epidemiologist in Texas who works with folks who have seizures, right? We share a couple of patients, and people who have seizures, right? They have seizures because their brain, there's something misfiring within their brain, right? I tell folks it's kind of like an electrical shortage within their brain that's causing those seizures. And so her population that she works with is very high risk because she is seeing the COVID infection attack the brain and has caused death in a lot of her population she works with who have seizures because they already have some change in the integrity of their brain and those neural pathways.
Right.
And so when we would have conversations, that really brought to my attention a little bit more about how the COVID virus affects our brain. And we know that affects our brain because we lose taste and smell, right? Those are specific areas within our brain that as part of the sensory system that affect our taste and our smell, right? And so they know that because they're like, okay, people report they can't taste and smell. So it would make sense that the virus would also attack other parts of our brain that help to produce those neurotransmitters. Yeah.
I mean, which is like, it's scary to think like that is the most, I mean, for me, that is the most important piece of equipment of this human body.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like,
yes.
What? Like, this virus has been attacked. Like, and then you think like, well, can it heal? Can my brain heal? Like, is my brain going to heal? Dr. Carmen?
Yes, it has the potential to, right? Because we know.
Yes, it has the potential.
Well, I mean, most folks who've had it, right, like their taste and smell will come back. Those changes in your neurotransmitters, they're just transitional, those changes. And so they will return as long as the virus is killed, right? That's the thing. So,
and a healthy immune system will kill the virus.
Yes. And when you get rid of the virus, whether the normal immune response, those things will return. Yes. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Gosh, like I just feel like this is just so important, like that people are aware of this because like I said, it's super hard to be sick. And then
on top of that,
like, to feel like I was talking to a lady and she said that she experienced like irritability and like frustration really bad. And she just thought it was like part of being sick. And it's like, no. And then like knowing the dangerous amount of knowledge I have about the body, right? Just a little enough to be dangerous. It's like, okay, well, is this attacking my gut health? And I know my gut health is very important for my serotonin levels. So then it's like, do I take care of my gut health or is it the brain? And then I just came to a place where it's like, I think my poor body is like my gut health's being attacked and my brain's being attacked. And I think I just need the hope that like your body's going to heal. It's going to heal it. But yes, like this is part of COVID. Depression, anxiety, panic attacks. Like it's part of the symptom
picture.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because we also know, that those certain strains of COVID do have more affinity for the digestive tract, right? When you get the diarrhea, the nausea, sometimes vomiting, but mostly like the diarrhea and the nausea. And so that's in your gut, right? So, and you're right, there's that connection between our gut produces a significant amount of our serotonin, about 70% of our serotonin, which doesn't always go directly to our brain, but it impacts our other rhythmic functions throughout the day. And then the other part is that we know that the majority of our immune system is produced in our gut, right? Yeah. So because this virus has that specific entering point with those ACE receptors, then we have to look at, okay, they're all over your body. So it's really just supporting that immune system so that it will kill the virus. And as it's killing it, then you'll, not have those symptoms because those cells will no longer be affected.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I don't know. I haven't done the research, but I know because I've worked with you for so long, right? And like I do focus on my gut health. I didn't have a lot of gut issues,
Right.
nor did my husband and I have very much, like, it didn't impact our lungs really.
Yeah.
And I attribute that to us kind of being very fit people, and like, but who knows? Maybe the virus was like, I don't really like your gut and lungs. Like, I just want to go for the brain. But yeah, so I just want to wrap it up, unless you have something else.
No, I think that kind of covers. I hope that explains things a little bit better as to what's going on, what the mechanism is there, and then kind of reframe sort of our expectations of the symptom profile with COVID.
Yeah, like to understand that this is a symptom that you can experience during COVID, right? Like it doesn't mean that it's truth. Like when you're feeling depressed and anxious and panic attacks, like all those thoughts that swirl with those things, that doesn't mean those thoughts are true. Like, just to be aware of that, because they feel so real, right? But then to also have hope.
Right.
That's what, like, I feel like COVID really robs you from, is like hope. Like, I'm going to get better. I'm going to get well. Like you need some hope to hang on to as you power through this. But I just want to tell you guys, like, if you are suffering from depression, from anxiety, panic attacks due to COVID, like, you won't want to reach out. You'll want to isolate even more, because that's part of depression. But try to make yourself have a friend that you can at least text a day. Or if you know you're getting sick, create like a triage of like people that you know will call you or send you letters or send you flowers, just to have a little bit of hope every day as you get, like, I was told 10 days. And so that was my life preserver.
Yeah.
It's like, get to day 10. You get to day 10, we've got it. Just get to day 10. And that's kind of what helped push me on to like not follow that deep, dark,
Yeah, to kind of
trail
go
that
down.
can take you on. Yeah. Reach out to people, create, a triage of like, call me, check on me. Like, and if you have someone that your family or friends that have COVID, like, no, this is real. And like, do what you can to let them know, like, and I know we don't want to like promise things, right? Like, oh, you're going to get better.
Yeah.
But I need that promise, whether I get better or not, in the moment of being really depressed and like isolated and panicking. Like, lie to me if you need to. Like, you're going to get better. You're going to get healthy. Because people need that hope to like push through.
Yeah. I think, I think that's perfect. I love those examples and those ideas. So oftentimes, especially with around this virus, is that hope has to outweigh that fear and that anxiety, right? Otherwise people will begin to spiral, and that's just, so those little glimmers, those glimpses, those ways that we can reach out to people that we know, who may be sick, and creating that for ourselves is so important. Yeah, those were great suggestions.
And people want to help. Like, people were like, oh, I'll bring you food and stuff. And it's like, I can't smell or taste. And really, like, when you're depressed, you don't want to eat. A lot of people don't. It's like, I don't care if you bring me food, but people want to help. And here is like a very helpful way of helping. Like, send me card, send me book, not me personally, right? But like when you have someone that's sick, like send them a card, send them books, send them flowers, send them like massive amount of love and hope.
Right. Yeah.
All right, friends. We wish you all well health this week, and we will talk to you guys next week.